loves the music of games, even if they don't even know it. I remember, especially when it comes to like racing games and stuff like that. I remember back in the day playing Test Drive 2, and just the intro of that music was like it got you into it, and like games like Burnout and stuff like that. Now, anyone that's used to the Forza series, I mean, they know that that is really great as far as the driving, the racing, the cars. I mean, I have a friend of mine that's into all of that, and he just loves collecting the cars, and he loves the realism of it. But sometimes people don't understand what it takes to put together the music that they love so much. So that's why it's really great to talk to these two, not only compose for movies, television, video games. So we're happy to have Kaveh Cohen and Michael Nielsen with us today. I did get it right when I said the name, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Ah,
Kaveh. Yeah, no
Kaveh.
worries. Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly.
Hi, Jay.
All right.
Glad to be on the show. Thanks very much for having us.
Cool, cool. So I was looking over all the work that you guys have done. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, seriously.
Thanks. Thank you.
Um, I mean, working on so many things too, because it's like I like a lot of things that sometimes people think don't go together. Like I love watching history stuff, so I did watch America, the Story of Us. I loved that series. It was really cool how they went through, from the very beginnings through the industrial times and all that. And then you've done things like Wolverine and X Men. I love that. Cartoon. It was really cool that a different take on the X-Men universe, and then of course video games. Um, how did you guys just get started in the beginning? Because I mean, obviously you have to have a tone for music to come up and do scores and be a composers. But how did you guys start out?
You want to go ahead?
Sure. Um, well, for me, it started, really early on at a young age. It was, sort of traditional piano lessons and whatnot. Um, but I soon sort of discovered that I was sort of able to write my own music. I was just sort of noodling around and creating my own little compositions and whatnot. And around that time, when I was pretty young, I sort of discovered film music through the movie E.T. I was really, really moved and really like impacted by John Williams' score, and I think that was my first real exposure. A to like film music, but and also like I said, I was starting to beginning to discover that I was able to write. So um, I think the love for this type of music started for me at a very early age, and I just kept on with the writing and started sort of slowly getting into the electronic side of things, getting my first synthesizer, and like a few years later, getting the first computer studio set up, and it just kept growing and growing, and just kept up. But my love of film music has been constant since I was little. I think that's what's driven me here so far.
And as for you,
Yeah.
Michael?
I don't know. I think I'm in my very early 40s, so I think when I grew up, like in the 80s, and it was a really cool time where TV shows had orchestral scores, and um, Williams was scoring these, like pioneering these amazing movies like the Star Wars sagas, and you had Alan Silvestri, and every great movie had this incredible soundtrack attached to it, and then like even going down to the TV shows like Robotech or Thundercats or something like that or Voltron, it just had this brought you in right away with the themes and the music. Um, so I mean that's really where on a scoring side where I first took notice of that being a thing and a component to these shows and movies that I really liked. Um, but I wanted to be in a band and became a guitar player, and band didn't really work out, but I really loved being in the studio and creating um, uh, stuff in the studio and basically just being creative there. So that's kind of where my world started to merge, and just being able to expand the studio palette, and then start to go back into the scores that I loved as a kid.
What was I guess the point where you went from, the training, the schooling, to getting to what you've done? Because obviously, with the high demand that you're in, you obviously have the skills. But at what point did that start to come in, where you start to hit these projects and start to say, hey, we're actually making a lot of traction?
Um, I think it was they're stepping stones. It wasn't like really like either of us went to uh, lived on a mountain with a composer and he taught us everything and then we came out and just landed this incredible gig. I think at every step of the way you get a project that you work really hard to get, and once you're on board, uh, you're just like in a panic mode and like, oh my god, how am I going to actually do this? And then you succeed at it at whatever level you can do. You know, if you're 20 years old or something, you just do your best, and then you keep hitting these stepping stones. And I still even feel like today, um, where my confidence is obviously much higher because we have a nice body of work. But every new project, there's a little bit of like, whew, okay, I gotta really wrap my head around this. How am I gonna do this? Um, and and I like that feeling because it feels like I'm growing with every project, and every project that comes up, I feel like I'm getting better and better at it.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I think a lot of the cliches are true. It is perhaps who you know and being at the right place at the right time. Because I know, looking back for me personally, I started in TV shows and documentaries and animation, and they all came from people that I had haphazardly met that needed help with their projects. I was doing a lot of ghostwriting in television, and um, my first major projects all came as referrals from friends who had friends that were making these shows. So, I think a lot of it is relatively haphazard. You just happen to come across people who help you out and make a referral, and hopefully you don't fall flat on your face, and you get through it, and now you've got one notch on your belt, and you hope for the next job. And obviously, early on the jobs are relatively few and far between. um, but as you gain traction and build momentum, people tend to find out about what you're doing, and then the jobs just continue to come.
Yeah, and I mean, the haphazard kind of randomness of it. Kaveh and I met at working at a music store, which was completely random. That really neither of us, if on paper, should have been working at that store. He was nowhere near where he lived. I really just needed something to do for a minute. I just graduated college, and I was like, okay, well, I'll be there. And the fact that we were there at the same time, and at that same time, there was about 4 or 5 other brilliant musicians that worked in the same area of the store, and it was just this really incredible little moment of just several months that was really formative for me. And I think then once we actually formed a company, actually many years later, that's sort of when like the real traction started hitting,
Yeah.
and it really took off. We have a lot of synergy, both on a friend level and musically, and I think it filled in a lot of blanks, and then quickly I was getting a lot stronger as a composer, um, and we just worked really well together on a business level and creatively.
What do you think it takes for people like that don't know? Because a lot of times, what'll happen is and I've seen this with like voice acting. You'll have someone else say, "Oh, I can make a voice," but they don't understand that you have to live in that character, and then you have to be able to do all types of pronunciations and give your emotion when you do the voice acting. And I've seen the same thing with people who are putting music together. You hear someone say, "Oh, well, whatever. I make videos with video games and I throw on a soundtrack or a sound that a song that I like and it sounds cool. What's so hard about it?" So for people who think like that, can you tell them what it takes, to actually put that together, to compose something that fits the game, that fits the story, that fits the emotion that you're trying to convey?
Well, I think it's a multi-tiered sensibility, really, because first and foremost, no matter what genre you're working in, whether it be film or television, advertising, games, whatever it is, you have to be a composer first. So when someone calls themselves a film composer, sure, that's true because they're spending their most of their time probably working in film. But the reality is, it all starts with being a composer, and that in itself, I mean, what you're doing is you're manifesting music out of nothing. You're manifesting something out of completely out of nothing that has to imbue a sense of emotionality. It has to have a visceral response for the listener. I mean, it's got a big job to do. When you listen to music, it affects you in one way or another. So with scoring, I think what ends up happening is you're taking the task of writing music. You need it to stand on its own, and at the same time, you need to be able to support whatever visual it is that you're working on. Again, no matter what genre it is. So if it's an action thing, you want to imbue the piece with a sense of action. If it's dramatic, if it's sad, all of any emotion, you have to somehow tie this fabric of the music and the emotionality of it together, which is a daunting task because the reality is that you don't always succeed. People might not respond to it the way that you, perhaps, as a composer, felt about it personally. So it is a multi-tiered um, job. There's really quite a lot that goes into it, both technically in the creation of the music. You want the music to be good. You want it to be memorable. You want it to be interesting. You want it to stand alone. You want it to work to picture. You want it to not get in the way of the picture. I mean, there's so many different things that you're trying to achieve with one piece of music. So I think it's a very complex thing that we're talking about here.
And I think it gets more complex when it's your job as a composer, and now you're working for producers, and you have perhaps also you have a music supervisor, producers, execs from several different places. So I know we always are trying to maintain the integrity of the music, but where that it changes from being like, oh, I write music to really being composer. You have to be able to manipulate the music, um, almost like surfing, just carving and while still maintaining the integrity of the music, because you'll get sometimes these crazy requirements of whether it's timing or it has to flip emotionally or it was perfect and now it's changed, so it still has to be perfect, but you have to completely reconform it to some new picture that they decided to splice in. And that's where I think the job as a composer really gets challenging, is because you're not just serving the music. You're serving the music. You're serving uh, any number of masters. But at the end of the day, as the composer, you have to really protect that the musical core of that.
Do you feel that sometimes with scores where people are listening to this, you have people that would download or purchase from somewhere the music and they'll be like, oh man, this is awesome. Like I know people who have gotten old school tracks from like Final Fantasy, they've gotten tracks from Halo, things like that, and they're like, oh man, this is awesome. But then you have other people who they're more used to just maybe how they see a movie where someone an artist makes a song for a movie and they're like, oh, that song was from this movie. Do you think that sometimes people don't fully recognize, like the general public, what goes into scoring because maybe it's just taken up by a big name artist that has that title song, but there's so much more music that people know they love, but they may not really realize how much it's a part of the film, television, or game.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the reality is that songs, mainstream songs, which are used in film all the time, and that's obviously now we're talking about marketing.
Hmm.
That's a whole other thing. But I mean, the reality is those songs are far more accessible to the general public. It's on the radio. It's something that could be on an album that you already own, and it's something that for most people is what they listen to in the car and so on and so forth. Composition or the scoring of the film score is a very abstract thing for most people. I really don't know if um, a layman of the general public really would know what composition entails, what it actually means to do that. And I've had that conversation many times. People ask, okay, well, how do you do that? How do you come up with something? And I don't know if there's really a straightforward answer to that. It just sort of appears, right? Or it's the sensibility when your fingers touch the keyboard and you're playing and you're pulling from all these different places that you know of, that you've learned over the years, that if you're trying to achieve a particular tone or timbre, you're pulling these devices that you've learned and you're trying to come up with something, and the sensibility that tells you that you're onto something, that you can explore it further. That's a very abstract thing to explain. It's innate. I don't think you can learn that sensibility. It's built into you. But it's at the same time, it's very hard to explain. Like, how do I explain? Okay, I'm trying to do something that feels serene and suspended. Now I'm gonna be working on that on the piano. I've come up with a melody and a set of chords or something that gives that feeling to me personally. But how I achieved it is relatively abstract. It's not something that I could easily explain. And I think for that reason and many others, the layman may not really grasp what composition entails and how it works or where it comes from.
And I think when you're listening to a soundtrack, um, a great soundtrack doesn't necessarily always translate to a CD or however you're going to listen to it. Sometimes a great soundtrack just works so well to picture and gives the heightened emotional pull to picture, and it just for whatever reason it doesn't work on a CD, whether there's too many jumps or it's too short or too long or not much is happening. So I think there's some hurdles. I understand if people don't listen to soundtracks, because sometimes it can be a little tough. I mean, you can always point them in the right direction. There's so many easy, palatable scores you could get into that it's like just candy. Horner and Silvestri and Williams, and I mean it's pretty easy. But I get it when people don't. My parents barely get it, so you know.
So with Forza, you had 90-piece orchestra.
Yes.
Along, man. I mean, I've seen that, of course, like John Williams, and you see various scores that are done, and they have this orchestra and stuff. Can you tell us what's like just working with, all that, those instruments and all that, and putting the music together using that?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's always a privilege. It really never gets old. Um, Walking into a great hall or studio room and having a bunch of people show up and just sit down and play your music. It's a pretty wild experience every time. We're very fortunate to have been able to do it a lot of times. So we um, it was decided very early on in Forza that we were going to have an orchestral score and we were going to work with a large group. Writing in that style, basically to incorporate the orchestra, was something that we did very, very early on because we knew it was going to be recorded live. Um, so there's a lot of preparation. I think it changes the way that you write. Oftentimes if there's no live recording, you're working with samples essentially. Samples don't necessarily behave as you wish they would. So you're writing to the sample, so to speak. But when you're gonna record the live orchestra, then it changes the way that you approach the score. It changes the way that you write for the score. And it's important to have some knowledge and grasp, obviously, of how each instrument's idiosyncratic approach should be in the writing. And but at the end of the day, when you're up on stage and they play the first note, they're just tuning up. It's an amazing thing to behold.
Yeah.
Is there, I guess, a themes that you look for, like especially in Forza 6? Is there something that you guys look for overall, like a overall theme or overall sound, or is it just based on each different score that you're doing? You're like, okay, this is gonna be for here, this is gonna be for there, or does it all blend together into like one flow?
Um, we before we even really sat down to write, we knew we wanted to have themes. We really wanted to have a proper Forza Motorsport theme, which hadn't been done before in the franchise. So we really wanted to establish that, and then we also wanted to carry on various themes throughout the game, so there was a real sense of a continuity in the music. And then as we started working with Turn 10 and Microsoft, uh, it was decided also we wanted to have a broader palette than some of the other games had, which was a single direction. So that we really tried to spread that out, and that's where the themes were absolutely necessary to hold a cohesive score together. Because you have some sort of industrial music happening in one race, and the next race you may just have a pure orchestral, and we didn't want it to feel like just a mishmash of tunes. we really wanted to feel like a score, and I think having themes and the Forza theme really helped pull that together.
And also, I think there was a technical component, and that is that you could revisit the same area of the game and not hear the same music. So it was really important for the music, the score as a whole, to be cohesive, because you could be playing the same track and pick the same car and never hear the same thing twice. So we didn't want it to be erratic and to feel disconnected or disjointed going from piece to piece to piece. So really what they are sort of variations on a core palette which was created. And the score as a whole is a very hybrid approach. It's got a lot of electronic programmed instruments along with the orchestra. So it's really just like, we went a little bit left of center for this set of music and a little bit right of center for this set of music. But on the whole, they're all very much connected.
Overall, did you have just a favorite? I mean, obviously that must be hard, but when you put something together, do you say, wow, this one or these couple are the ones that really nail it for me? Or overall, you're like, hey, I put it together as a whole the way I wanted to, so I love each one, equally.
Well, I'll give you a secret. The soundtrack, the way we got to sequence and master the soundtrack. So really, it started with, hey, pick your like 3 or 4 favorites. I'll pick my 3 or 4 favorites, and we'll shove it at the top of the soundtrack. So that's, for me, that's where you could find that on the soundtrack. My favorites are kind of in that top 10 on that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple pieces that I think for both of us were like really special, that we really really like. I think we both really like the main theme. There's a couple of action pieces from the races that I think we both really really enjoy. They just came out really cool, especially once they were recorded live. But yeah, I think I think we're very pleased with the outcome of the whole thing. We worked hard.
So I have a question, and I admit that this one's silly, but I always think that gamers, people who do video game stuff, should be treated like the same celebrity status as actors and stuff like that. Now, with all the work that you've done, with the skills that you guys have, do you ever try to use that, like as any celebrity, like, or even like if you're going out and you're like, hey, that song you like, that was me. I mean, people need to get credit for this. I mean, out in the world, more than just the industry or people who really look and say, "Oh, it was composed by them." I mean, I want everyone to know. Have you guys ever done that before?
No.
No.
No, it's kind of, I don't know about you, but it's we have young kids, so like it's kind of nice that when our kid acknowledges that, it was like, oh my god, my dad made that, or when the commercial comes on or something. That's pretty cool, but that's kind of as deep as it usually goes.
I mean, there's occasions that have come up where you run into people and they happen to know the game or project and they happen to be a fan of the music, and they'll make mention of it, which is very nice, of course. I mean, you're always holed up in the studio, got your face in your computer working countless hours, and then the music goes out into the world, and if you ever get any feedback and someone pats you on the head and tells you did a good job, it's always welcome. But as far as like I don't know, red carpet and paparazzi and stuff hasn't happened yet.
Have you ever had a moment where everything just looked like it was going wrong? I mean, I understand that when in composing music it may be a little bit different, like you said, since you're working kind of contained. But was there a moment where maybe even early on where you were working on something and you were just saying, man, this just isn't going right? Like I'm not feeling it, almost like writer's block.
Yeah. I think that happens all the time. There's multiple levels of things not going right that happen regularly. And the first one is you get the project and you ask yourself, how the hell am I going to do this? Because you feel like you've never written music before. That happens with every project. That's the first step. The second is, yeah, I think you get really good at when you started with an idea and it's terrible, you just know to catch it really soon. so you don't get knee deep in something that you think sucks, basically. You know what I mean?
There's also, we have a nice benefit that, like, we're in Kaveh's studio right now. Mine is about 10 feet that way.
Oh,
That
nice.
way. So, if he's walking by and he's like, really? That's what you're going with? Makes you'll second guess it, or, So,
Yeah, we have fail safes built in,
Yeah.
basically, that save time. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, writer's block happens, for everybody. I think there's just some days you come here and you just sit in front of the screen and you're spinning your wheels for 8 hours, and you go home with nothing more than 12 Facebook posts or something. But part of the process and part of the experience, I think, that comes over time is learning how to combat those moments and how to step away, or how to find another source of inspiration, or whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I can't think of any time, not in recent memory anywhere, where something went catastrophically wrong, that you would just say, oh man, everything just fell apart and there were problems like that. Knock on wood, I'm gonna knock on some wood here. That hasn't happened in a very, very long time.
No, because really the worst case scenario, you just get to the point on a particular piece of music where you say, I'm going to put this aside and start something fresh, because maybe there's too many hurdles to jump over on this one. It just didn't work. And, that's not the end of the world.
Or the client doesn't like it. I mean, that happens all the time. And I think that's actually really part and parcel of the artist's journey. Is early on, when you're young and you're starting out, when you write a piece that you like, you're holding on to it tight, like it's your magnum opus, like you're never going to write something that good again.
Right.
And in reality now, you just don't have that luxury. If someone says, like, we could think our version 1 was amazing, and if the client thinks it's not, guess what?
Gotta scrap it.
You just throw it away, and you just keep going.
And sometimes you have to take the journey with the client, and go to version 3, 4, 5, so that they come back to version 1
or 10 or 12 or whatever. I mean,
it happens.
It's not uncommon for a client to be, for lack of a better description, stabbing around in the dark trying to find what they want to hear. And sometimes, as Michael said, you just have to go down that rabbit hole with them until you find it.
Now, obviously, you had great credits. I mean, I'm looking again at the things like, I mean, Jurassic World, Black Mass, San Andreas, Ant-Man, Fantastic Four, Avengers: Age of Ultron. I mean, Chappie, Guardians of the Galaxy, Hunger Games. I mean, obviously, at this point, there's jobs coming in. There's things that you're passionate about. Are there points where sometimes you get a project or someone says, "Hey, would you like to do this?" and you look at it and you're like, no. Like, I'm not it. I mean, obviously you can't say any names, but I mean, does that happen where you're just like, nah, this is just not something I think, because you've done a lot of stuff from different, genres and stuff, so obviously multi-talented, but has there just been a project that you're just like, no?
Yeah, again, it happens. I think we're very blessed to be in a point in our careers where we can turn something down, and it takes a long time to get there. Starting out, you pretty much do everything and anything because it's an opportunity for the work. It's an opportunity to better yourself and better your craft, learn some chops. It's an opportunity to build relationships, and so on and so forth. And not that those things don't have any merit or count today, because of course they do. But, you gauge your time a little bit differently. Your interests are a little different. Obviously, there's a financial component. If a project just simply, may not be working in that respect. So I think for a number of different reasons, you have a little bit more luxury at this juncture in a career to maybe do a little bit more of what you really want to do.
Do you get close to, at least on the gaming side? Because I mean, with films, I guess it could be a little bit different, or television shows. You'll see it later, and you're like, oh, that's really cool to see your work out there. With games, you can actually play it. Do you guys get into any games? Did you guys grow up with games themselves that you love the music to it, and you said to yourself, okay, I'm gonna do all this other stuff because I love it too, but games, it was brought to me from gaming, or was it just another genre that you wanted to do?
I think we like the first game we did, Splinter Cell.
Mm-hmm.
We were beyond excited because we had played it from Splinter Cell 1.
Nice.
Um, so that, and same with Forza. It's like we're fans of the franchise, and for, whether it's Mortal Kombat or uh, Metal Gear or any go all the way back. I mean, we've been playing games on since
Childhood,
yeah.
really.
So yeah, it's pretty exciting to work on games that are great games and high profile, but to be a part of a game that comes out and pushes an envelope, or it's just really I'm very happy to be in there.
Absolutely. And I think there was a point in time where games took on a far more cinematic approach to their scores. I don't think game music for a while was really a thing, um, until it evolved, and I think it matured. Now, in retrospect, we go back and we enjoy older game music, like whatever it could be, Tetris or Donkey Kong, whatever, and they'll do symphonic versions of it and this and that because they have so much charm for us today. Early game music,
Mhm.
but during the time of early game music, I just don't think it was a thing. It became a thing at some point. When you look back and you look at, I think like the first big orchestral score was John Debney's score for Layer, or things like that were sort of pivotal. Um, I think ever since then, the opportunities have grown, and there's been so much more game music, great game music that's as good as anything out there to listen to. And it's allowed composers like us to cross genres and bring what we do in other areas and bring it over to the game industries, which, by the way, is an incredible industry to work in.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading on the release about how you did a special for the League of Legends World Championships. I mean, who would ever have thought? I mean, I've been in gaming forever, but I never thought that I would see Staples Center, packed full of people watching other people play a game at a high level. I mean,
That's true.
what was it like doing that? Not only from just putting together the music for it, but also just being there and saying, "Wow, all these people to watch these guys play League of Legends."
Well, I didn't get to go.
Yeah.
That's the that's the downside.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, no, we didn't get to go, but it was great nonetheless. I'd been playing League of Legends for a couple years before we got that, so I was particularly tickled to be able to work on that. And it came out really great. And then the fact that it was aired at Staples Center was kind of awesome.
It was a little surprising though. Like, I personally didn't know that they did that they have these world championships. I had heard, I think in South Korea they have these sort of like video game athletic events in stadiums where people come and they play, StarCraft.
Hmm.
We got the battery thing going on. So I'd heard about it over there, but I didn't know that we did it here at the Staples Center. So we went in, or at least I went into doing the music, sort of not really understanding what it meant, until afterwards, where you're like, oh my god, they'd sold out at Staples, and
Yeah.
it's been streamed millions of times, and it was a really big deal. It was pretty interesting to see what a following it has.
And the animation cut that they put together was really cool.
That's right. It was a whole anime style thing. They brought in these top guys in anime to do the
Where
to do the animations.
they animeized all of the top players that were playing in the championship and
Oh,
kind of
nice.
gave them the powers of the League of Legends guys. And
Yeah, it was very cool.
yeah, it was cool.
Have you ever had like a celebrity or anybody come to you or send you a message or something and say, "Wow, that was great what you did on X"?
I haven't, but every E3 that we have a big game at, Steven Spielberg has happened to seems to be a fan of that franchise,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's always a video of Steven Spielberg at E3, and seems to go every year. So I got to see Steven Spielberg play Forza, and then our music comes on. I got to see him with Splinter Cell,
Splinter Cell,
and the music comes on. So hey, that's close, pretty good.
Awesome. So the Forza Motorsport 6 soundtrack is available now. Um, what are you guys working on next, if you can tell us?
We're actually back on board with Microsoft. I just can't talk about what we're doing.
Okay.
But there's a couple of great things coming. Um,
There'll be something I think dropping in the next like month and a half or so.
yeah, I would look
Something
out
like that. Yeah.
what's coming, and then I mean, there's discussions for some other game projects. Again, everything is unfortunately not something we could talk about at this time. But we do a lot of work in the movie advertising world, so we've got a lot of new music. It's all going to be live orchestra and stuff coming out, and I'm sure you'll see it in campaigns all over the place. So we're always got our hands full doing something.
Cool. If people want to keep a track of what you guys are doing, is there a place where they can go to follow you guys?
Yeah, we have personal websites. Michael's is
MichaelNielsenMusic.com.
and mine is KavehCohen.com. And we both have Facebook. We both have Twitter. Again, just our names.
And there's also NinjaTracks.com, which is our company that handles the movie trailers. There's a Ninja Tracks Facebook page.
Yeah. So yeah,
we're around.
We're around.
Awesome. So we'll be sure to put that up on the YouTube video as well and on our website so people can check that out. But
Thank you.
Kaveh, Michael, thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
so much,
us.
Jay.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.